Good evening. Tonight, a developing geopolitical story is raising serious questions about U.S. foreign policy, NATO unity, and the future of the Arctic. According to people familiar with internal cost estimates, the United States could be forced to pay as much as $700 billion if it were to pursue President Donald Trump's goal of acquiring Greenland. That staggering figure, generated by scholars and former U.S. officials involved in strategic planning, highlights just how far-reaching and controversial this idea has become. Greenland, a massive island of roughly 800,000 square miles, sits at the center of growing global competition in the Arctic, and Trump has repeatedly described it as vital to American national security. But the price attached to that ambition would exceed half of the Pentagon's annual budget, a reality that has alarmed lawmakers in Washington and leaders across Europe. The estimate was developed as part of discussions around Trump's belief that Greenland could serve as a strategic buffer against adversaries such as Russia and China, both of which are expanding their influence in the Arctic region. Trump has openly argued that owning Greenland outright would give the United States greater control over military positioning, natural resources, and future security threats in the far north. His rhetoric has gone well beyond diplomatic curiosity, with the president stating publicly that the U.S. will acquire Greenland one way or the other. Those words have intensified concerns among America's allies, especially Denmark, which governs Greenland as a semi-autonomous territory, and among Greenlanders themselves. Officials in Denmark and Greenland have been unequivocal in their response. Greenland is not for sale. Leaders from both governments have rejected the idea outright, stressing that Greenland's future will be decided by its people, not by outside powers. Greenland's Foreign Minister Vivian Motzfeldt made that position clear as she arrived in Washington, saying her country does not want to be owned by, governed by, or become part of the United States, and that Greenland chooses to remain part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Despite those firm statements, senior White House officials confirm that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been instructed to explore a formal proposal to purchase Greenland, calling the effort a high priority for the president. This week, Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance are scheduled to meet with officials from Denmark and Greenland in Washington. Those meetings follow earlier, lower-level discussions with the White House National Security Council, as Danish and Greenlandic leaders seek clarity on what the United States actually intends to do. The urgency is evident. Greenland's Minister for Business and Mineral Resources, Naja Nathanielsen, has said the pressure coming from Washington is causing real distress among Greenlanders, to the point where people are losing sleep. She described the situation as a massive strain on households and public discussion, though she reiterated that Greenland has no intention of becoming American. From a military standpoint, U.S. officials note that Washington already enjoys broad access in Greenland under existing agreements. The United States maintains a presence at Pituffik Space Base, where American personnel operate radar systems critical for early warning against missile threats from Russia. Under current arrangements, the U.S. can already deploy additional troops, expand infrastructure, and enhance its security footprint if needed. As one U.S. official bluntly put it, there is little reason to invade the cow when they're already selling you the milk. That remark reflects a broader view inside parts of the administration, that cooperation, not ownership, already gives the U.S. most of what it wants strategically. Still, the debate inside the Trump administration remains unsettled. While some officials have openly suggested that military force could be used to take control of Greenland, others see that as unlikely and dangerously destabilizing. A more realistic alternative under discussion is a compact of free association, an arrangement under which Greenland would receive significant U.S. financial support in exchange for granting Washington expanded security access. The United States already has similar agreements with the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, and Palau. Such a deal would allow the U.S. to strengthen its strategic position in the Arctic at a fraction of the cost of outright purchase, potentially satisfying Trump's broader vision of expanding American influence in the Western Hemisphere. Trump himself has framed the issue in business terms, comparing ownership of Greenland to owning property rather than leasing it. He argues that ownership would secure long-term rights to land, resources, and military positioning, potentially making Greenland comparable to U.S. territories such as Guam, Puerto Rico, or American Samoa. His concern, according to experts and testimony from former officials, is that Greenland could one day pursue full independence from Denmark. If that happened, Trump fears the island's 27,000 miles of coastline and vast natural resources could fall under the influence of rivals like Russia or China. However, public opinion in Greenland sharply contradicts that vision. Polling conducted last year found that roughly 85% of Greenlanders oppose becoming part of the United States, reflecting a strong sense of national identity and self-determination. While Greenland has shown openness to hosting additional U.S. military assets and negotiating over access to rare earth minerals and other strategic resources, the idea of U.S. ownership remains deeply unpopular. Trump's interest in Greenland is not new. During his first term, he floated the idea of buying the island, but it was largely dismissed at the time, even by some of his closest advisors. What has changed is the seriousness with which the proposal is now being pursued. Since returning to office, Trump has revived the idea with renewed urgency. In December, he appointed Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry as a special envoy to Greenland, reigniting concerns in Copenhagen and Nuuk. Since then, European officials say there is a growing sense that Trump will succeed in extracting some form of concession or expanded role for the U.S., even if full ownership remains unlikely. The prospect of military force has triggered particular alarm. Experts warn that any attempt to seize Greenland by force would cause unprecedented damage to the NATO alliance. Denmark and the United States are both NATO members, and an act of aggression against Danish territory would represent a fundamental breach of alliance principles. Ian Lesser of the German Marshall Fund has said that while Trump-ES threats may be intended as pressure tactics, the actual use of force is highly unlikely, noting it would provoke massive backlash within NATO and likely face strong opposition from Congress. That resistance is already emerging on Capitol Hill. A bipartisan group of senators has introduced legislation that would prohibit the Defense Department from using funds to assert control over the sovereign territory of a NATO member without that country's consent or approval by NATO's North Atlantic Council. The bill is widely seen as a direct response to Trump-AS rhetoric and a signal that Congress is prepared to block any unilateral military action against Greenland. Despite the tensions, Greenland remains strategically important to the United States, and cooperation continues. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has acknowledged that there are ways to strengthen the U.S. military footprint on the island without undermining sovereignty, noting that American forces are already present and could potentially expand their role through agreement rather than coercion. At the same time, she has warned that any attempt to take Greenland by force would unravel NATO itself. Last week, European allies, including Denmark, issued a joint statement reaffirming their commitment to sovereignty and territorial integrity, stating clearly that Greenland belongs to its people. That message underscores the central issue at the heart of this debate. While Greenland's strategic value is undeniable, its future cannot be decided through pressure or threats. As this story continues to unfold, the question is no longer whether Greenland matters, but how far the United States is willing to go to secure its interests there, and at what cost, financially, diplomatically, and politically. The coming weeks of negotiations may determine whether this dispute is resolved through cooperation, economic agreements, or deeper confrontation within the Western alliance.